Chief. Malcolm Bruce is the first ever Chief Executive Officer of the newly formed Edmonton Global, a regional economic development corporation that drives growth and investment in the Edmonton region. Edmonton Global is a joint venture owned equally by 50 municipalities in the Edmonton region. Before its creation, economic development in the Edmonton region was often done at a municipal rather than a regional level. Edmonton Global was created to change this. In his work, Malcolm brings together regional strengths and networks to seize on the potential of emerging markets. Malcolm has a strong history of leadership in the Edmonton region. Prior to being the CEO of Edmonton Global, Malcolm was the CEO of the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board, a regional planning corporation. He oversaw the smooth transition of the board membership, leadership, and mandate. Prior to that role, he had a long career in progressively senior leadership positions within the Canadian military. He's also the chair of the Consider Canada City Alliance, CCCA, which represents the 12 largest economies in Canada and that account for 84% of all foreign direct investment in the country. His skills in leadership, strategic planning, and organizational change have been sought out to support the strategic planning and operations on many large, complex issues, including at the 2010 Vancouver Winter Olympics and the 2013 floods in southern Alberta. He holds a BA degree in history from the University of Manitoba, 2 MA degrees from the Royal Military College of Canada, and the ICDD designation from the Institute of Corporate Directors. Please help me in welcoming Malcolm Bruce.
You know, as they say, as you get older, your bio gets too long. So I think I need to shorten that. So anyways, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And thank you to the Chamber for, again, this opportunity to be able to speak with this very august group. But before I go on, I just have to acknowledge both the political leadership in St. Albert and the team that supports that political leadership with Kevin, Pat, and Mike and the like. Just for tremendous cooperation at the regional level, but also for making this journey over the last few years at the regional table very, very successful. So just an acknowledgement to Mayor Heron, the councillors, and Kevin and team. It's a real pleasure to work with them, and I think collectively, hopefully you'll see the return on investment that has been so much of the investment. I would like to start with a land acknowledgement. Next slide, please. To begin today by acknowledging that we are meeting on traditional gathering lands and the center for trade for many First Nations, Métis, Inuit people, including the Cree, Saulteaux, Ojibwe, Anishinaabe, Dene, Nakota Sioux, and Iroquois. Edmonton Global operates on Treaty 6 land, and we work to transition our regional, as we work to transition our regional's economy, we recognize that inclusivity is at the heart and sustainable growth and transformation. We understand that Indigenous partnerships and voices must be at the forefront of radical transformation in our region. So as treaty partners, let's work together to reach this shared vision. Next slide, please. So I love this slide because I'm, a very big proponent that I think the Edmonton region is in a very bullish position. Next, please. Now, why would I say that? Why do I actually think that we're in a bullish position? We're coming out of COVID. There's a number of real struggles that are real in many businesses. Finding talent, for example, today to reopen fully and things are all continue to be very real and tangible requirements for business that need to be able to grow their business. But some of the macro trends and some of the things that we're seeing on a global stage, but also on a regional stage, show me that we actually have a number of things right in this region, and that we should be looking to this very positive sign for a very positive future. Next, please. And here's some specifics. We've got top talent. We have 7 post-secondary institutions, plus we have one of the best K-12 educational systems in the country. And out of those 7 post-secondary institutions, we graduate somewhere between 22 and 30,000 every single year. And if you speak to all 7 of the post-secondary presidents, they all want to grow that. University of Alberta, for example, want to move from 40,000 students to 50,000. So we only see the growth of our talent increasing over next. And as you know, talent is what drives the future. And we've got an abundance of it. The key for us is to make sure that we keep it here. We've got tons of innovation. Most recent article I I just was reading is that we've got 75 different individual startup gaming companies that have happened in the region over the last little while, and they're spread across the entire region. And this is a really good sign for the innovation ecosystem because it's just one segment of it, but what we're seeing is some real vital signs in growth in that particular area. We're young, we're educated, and we're growing. As you know, we're the second youngest region in the country. Saskatoon beats us by a couple of months, but it's really important when you're talking to potential investors and where do you want to grow your business is there's a future here. Our mean average age is about 36. And if you look in places like Germany, Japan, it's well into the 50s now. We have a strong community, and St. Albert's a classic representation of that. Your community in St. Albert is very strong, it's very welcoming, and it's very inclusive. We are globally connected, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And of course, we have focus, which again, I'll speak to a little bit more as we move along. Next, please. But this is a key. We have a demand base, a market base of 1.5 billion people. We're the only G7 country that can trade with, have free trade agreements with all the other G7 countries. And then given our connectedness and our roots to Asia and our connectedness to the US, Mexico, South America, and Europe, really allow us to access markets that, quite frankly, are unique to this particular region. Next, please. In terms of focus, next, we have looked at where do we have current strengths, where are there clusters, where can we build on? And we have lots of things going on. For example, in this chart, you'll see there's no aerospace industry. It's not to say that we don't have an aerospace sector or an aerospace industry here, but when it comes to our real core vertical pillars, these four, energy and clean tech, health and life science, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing, and food and agriculture are really where we have a competitive advantage in the global marketplace. These are then supported by, of course, artificial intelligence and advanced technology, as well as noted, is our logistics capacity, both in terms of our air bridge to Asia, but also our connectedness on road through the Canamex road that takes you from Mexico all the way up to Edmonton and vice versa, as well as our two port connections through CN and CP, both to the city of Vancouver and the port of Prince Rupert. Next, please. But, you know, those are big pillars. And one of the things that we have recognized is that to coin Chris McLeod, and I understand his son is on this call, so I just want to make a shout out for his son. But Chris McLeod has always used this analogy is we're used to fishing with nets. So we kind of throw the net out in the water and hopefully we catch a couple of fish. The way we've changed our strategic approach to creating opportunities in the investment community is to really go fishing with spears. So what this means is we've looked at each of our really value add growth sectors. We've looked at the full value chain, seen where the gaps are, created business cases around those gaps, and then developed a product we can take to market and sell. And these subsectors in energy, food and agriculture, health and life science are the first business cases that we've been producing and supporting with webinars, virtual events, and in-market activities to attract investment here. And these are proven to be very beneficial, both in terms of attracting foreign investment, but more important, giving us a real sort of laser focus on those things that we're going to go after. We can't be all things to all people, and these are things that we actually have significant value, significant strength and value in from a regional perspective. Next, please. And we are succeeding, and I think this is where where I get really bullish. Next, please. So last year during COVID, we thought, wow, when this hits, it's going to hit hard. But actually, you'll see from the 2020 final investment decisions that depending on how those 5 pending public announcements, so privately they've been made, but pending public announcement, it's anywhere from $211 to $294 million were raised last year in terms of investments into the region. And then individual companies had raises well over $450 million. And for some folks, they may not know company names like OncoQuest, which is a little cancer research company that raised $63 million. DriveWise, which is a company that raised $82 million. And of course, Jobber, which is probably more known by many in terms of a software application for the working folks. It raised over 60 million bucks. So overall, that kind of investment mostly into the tech community in our region is significant. And then so far this year, we've had $1.5 billion worth of confirmed final investment decisions, as well as where I think the bottom number is the important one is companies have raised $1.2 billion worth of cash so far from our region. Some of it's through M&A, some of it's through investment, but it really shows that for the international investor, they see something special going on in this region where they can actually see future growth for their own business purposes. And then the final bar on the bottom is just an indication that we've got about $100 million worth of potential final investment decisions over the next 5 months to take us to the end of this calendar year. So this again is why I'm very bullish and I'm happy to talk about any of this. Next slide, please. But we're not only working on the immediate, we're also looking at what's next and then really what the future state is. And this goes back to the theme of the presentation around radical transformation of the region. What will this region be known for in 15 or 20 years? What are we actually going to be a global competitor in when it comes to the international investor? Where are we going to be in position to Metro Denver, to Stockholm, to Kuala Lumpur? So how do we position against them from a future state, building on the strengths that we have? So yes, we need to work on the here and now. So when a company comes in and says we need help, we need to help them. We also need to look, and this goes back to this net and spear, the 1 to 5 year, where can we go in the value chain that starts adding to this clustering effect as also build out of the individual value chains for these sectors? How can we make that all happen over the next 1 to 5 years? And then finally, this transformational growth. And I just want to spend a little bit more time on this transformational piece. Next, please. So there are 5 major irons in the fire that all align overall to our strategic direction and our strategic pillars. But they're worth really highlighting individually because this is where we start to do the stubby pencil work. So think about hydrogen. There has been one big final investment decision made already in hydrogen called Air Products, $1.3 billion, 1.3. Yeah, 1.3 this year. And then there's been so far a couple of announcements to make an announcement. The Petronas one is one that's a joint venture between Japan and Malaysia, and they're looking at building a facility to move ammonia as the carrier for hydrogen that will carry 1 million tons of hydrogen to Japan by 2027. And there are more of those coming. The key for us in the hydrogen space, though, is twofold. One, we need to build up the domestic demand. So how does bus fleets, commercial trucking fleets, heat and power help us accelerate the demand domestically? And then 2, how do we make sure that we can get to market with our product? So how does that 1 million tons of hydrogen move from here to the coastline and then eventually to Japan? And the Japanese would like to have this moving by 2027. So there's a lot of work to do to make sure that our partners and those that are going to be involved with this particular project or projects are aligned. Stand by for more on the hydrogen space. We're going to be holding a lot more information and sessions along the way to make sure the community is aware of the opportunities and businesses on where they can access into this hydrogen opportunity. But it is massive, and it's massive because we here in this region are able to scale to meet global demand, which is a really unique feature of our particular region. Diabetes, as you know, biopharma is another one. There's a number of interesting projects going on, but any of you that know Shapiro, Dr. Shapiro in the University of Alberta, he's basically convinced he's going to crack the code on type 1 diabetes here in the next 10 years. So what this really seized us to do is look at a roadmap to figure out how do we get from here to 2035 on the diabetes roadmap, amongst other things, hepatitis C amongst a couple of others. capitalizing on the R&D in our universities, but also on Nobel laureates like Michael Houghton. So biopharm is a big one. And with COVID, we've only seen this accelerate. Food and agriculture. Some of you may have already heard this province has a farm sale to value add agriculture of 1-to-1 ratio. Ontario's 3-to-1, BC's 3-to-1. The Netherlands are about 30-to-1. We have an ability to really take this particular sector and grow it, particularly in the value add, not just in value add food or value add itself, but also in food and food tech and ag tech. To put it in perspective, if we move from a 1-to-1 to 2-to-1 in the Edmonton metropolitan region, we will grow the GDP by $4.6 billion. $4.6 billion if we could just move that number from 1 to a 2. And that's a goal for ours over the next 10 years. Logistics, as you know, I think our connectedness is one of our core strengths. Buildings like Uniline that were built in St. Albert, but as well, Amazon's moving to now 7 different warehouses here amongst a number of other opportunities in the logistics space, because they've recognized the importance of this region as a hub to be able to service the North American market from Asia, both in the air bridge side, but also on the land connectedness. And it all gets wrapped under this umbrella of the Port Alberta nomenclature. And then finally, of course, artificial intelligence and ML. So these are really the big 5 irons in the fire. We may not get them all, but somewhere down the line, these things are going to be what represents this region in the international space on a go-forward basis. Next, please. And that really highlights why I think this is a very bullish economy for our region, but also why I'm so buoyed on the opportunities here. We have a very diverse economy, and I think we've got lots of opportunity to grow and expand, and I'm very excited to be part of that. So thank you very much, Curtis. I'm happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, Malcolm, for the informative presentation. We're going to jump into the Q&A portion of our event, and we'll take questions from the room or post them in the chat box. I've got a couple questions here that I can get us started. Let's see.
And just so everybody's aware, if I can't answer them, I've got Chris McLeod here. He'll take all the tough ones. Perfect.
Well, Cohen prepped some of these questions up for us here. So they're either lob balls or they're going to put the screws to here. I guess we'll find out. Are there any projects or investments in hydrogen that St. Albert might be a good fit for, or how can we stay competitive? You know, it comes up all the time, and I guess the question is, how do you get in front of it as a municipality like St. Albert or a business in St. Albert?
Yeah, so it goes back to the supply chain issue, right? So I don't think you're going to get a heavy petchem facility in the boundaries of St. Albert, but you're looking at certain things, right? You've got new lands that are coming on. You've got the supply chain system that I think are going to be very supportive. So I think there's lots of opportunity for St. Albert to be part of the supply chain for the hydrogen market. But not only that, you're also part of other collaborations like the Regional Transit Commission. And part of what you're doing is they're looking right now is what is going to be the fleet mix for transit on a go-forward basis. So if you think, now I'm just going to use some modeling, but if you think about a 20-year life cycle on a bus, halfway through that life cycle, they change out the power pack. So the question is if we need to convert, say, in the transit system, 750 buses or 1,000 buses to hydrogen, because I know there'll be a mixed fleet, right? Some will be electric and whatever makes sense for those routes that they're going to service. So if it's normally a 20-year life cycle, can we now use a lot of the federal dollars that are out there for conversion to a lower carbon economy and actually accelerate that conversion so that we're now going to do it in 10 years or 5 years time? And then the question is then how do we build out the infrastructure that's going to support those things? So whether it's heat and power, commercial or public sector transportation. So you can go to corporations and actually say, okay, we need people to either partner with international firms or partner locally to be able to build out the fueling stations, the training that's going to be required, the educational systems that are going to be needed, the parts that are going to be required for manufacturing and everything. So I think there's a ton of opportunity for all the communities to be heavily involved in this. And look at the size of the prize, $2.3 trillion. Federally, the federal government has said we want to be a top 3 supplier of hydrogen to the international market. But just so you know, that Air Products deal, that $1.3 billion is actually just to service the domestic market, the phase that they're building. It's not even meant to be an export. They've got other phases to be able to grow that, to be able to meet the export market. So companies like Air Products, who are international, Linde, who are international, are looking at our region as a domestic play first. So the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub is about establishing a hydrogen economy here locally and making sure it all works. So I'm really buoyed about hydrogen. So supply is not the problem. People want to talk about supply, don't worry about the supply. We need to focus on creating the demand and accelerating that demand so that all these other things can occur.
Right, thank you, that's a great answer. Can you tell us about the Air Services Opportunity Fund and what the Chamber can do to help?
Well, as you know, businesses, many businesses that are involved in work outside of this particular region need to travel. And we're a fly-in, fly-out community, by and large, because we don't have 30 million Americans just sitting south of the border that are going to drive up to say hello. So your community has stepped up with the other 13 that have supported the Regional Air Services Opportunity Fund. And really, as we've said, businesses use the flights, and that's really where businesses make the difference. So right now, as you know, we had 52 direct destinations we were flying pre-COVID, and we were just getting Germany online when COVID hit, and we lost our international status. We were not one of the 4 that kept their international flight status, but now we're back in the game as of the 9th of August. We've got up to 25 flights now to direct destinations as of today. We're hoping by Christmas we've got 45 is what the projection is, as long as the 4th wave doesn't get too bad. But where we're really looking to use that Regional Air Services Opportunity Fund is on those strategic flights that are really important to the economy. So think about Europe, not London, think about Amsterdam and Frankfurt. And I'm not saying these will be the ones that we use the flight, I'm just saying as examples. Those are 2 connected airports. Once you're into there, you can connect anywhere in the globe. So when you're thinking about a business and ease of travel, those are important flights. Think about the Eastern Seaboard, New York, for example. Think about the Western Seaboard, particularly for the aviation community around San Francisco and Seattle. Those flights aren't back yet, and we need to get those flights back. And then, of course, for our petrochem and energy industry, Houston. So there are key considerations. So as these flights come back on, I do encourage businesses to look at their ability to start traveling, particularly those that are in the international markets. But I will say to you, talking to a CEO the other day who went into Europe, she's spending about €1,000 getting tests to move from Zurich to Berlin to somewhere else. And why? Is because the lack of a vaccine passport that's recognized in the international community is essentially hampering businesses' ability to move seamlessly in a number of spots in the world. So I know domestically there's one play, but just from an international perspective and business travel perspective, we need to understand the way the rest of the world's going, and we need to ease the facility and the way that we move across this world in order to grow our businesses. So I think it's very important that we keep the business lens always in focus.
So just building on that question, so is Edmonton Global working with EIA to get more direct air services? Is there a mechanism inside you guys are working towards for Europe and the US?
Yeah, so I'm happy to talk a little bit more. So what we did is, it was really the leadership of the regional mayor. So what they said was, how can we help facilitate? So it's not an airport play per se, it's really about the flights, right? It's about where we go to, which is now the airport's a mechanism to get those flights back, because that's where flights come from and emanate from, right? So what they said was, we want to have the accountability for this fund to make sure that we're getting value for money that we're putting into the fund. But we also recognize that we need to give, some direction about what we want. So what we want is we want to return to these strategic, economically imperative direct flights. We want to have it managed by a system that we have in place, which is Edmonton Global. But we know that the partnership with the airlines and the airport is where the rubber hits the road, right? Because the airport is able to enhance not just the fund aspect, but also landing fees, and also connect the dots between the partnerships, like the Star Alliance partnership. All these things have to be taken into account. So the airport does a lot of the stubby pencil work, and then they have a request that comes into us. We do our due diligence through the board, and then the board says yay or nay. And then once the flight has been confirmed, then assistance from the fund goes to that airline for the next 3 years. And the fund is very definitive in scope and very definitive in time. So the fund will expire in June of 2024.
Awesome. Thank you. Just kind of building on a comment you made about a vaccine passport. So, how is COVID regulation or vaccine passports? How do you feel it will affect international investment decisions? Do you think that's going to play a role here?
I think it's going to be. I think it's a question of when, not if. And so, if you think about travel, I mean, I went to the Yukon this summer, and I needed to show that I was double vaccinated. And in the Yukon, there's the Alaska Highway, and there's 6,000 service personnel from Alaska being posted down to the continental US and vice versa. So there's like 12,000 movers. So when you arrive at the Yukon BC border, you're asked if you're going to be transiting through, where you're given a window of 24 hours to do so. So it's mostly for the Americans moving back and forth on their postings. But for the rest of us, we had to actually demonstrate the 2 vaccine. And then we were given a green sticker that was put on a trailer in our car so that we had showed proof of vaccination just to travel in the Yukon. And even with double vaccination, we couldn't get into the Northwest Territories. And this is inside our country. So if you then layer on the complexities of an international, there will be some reckoning where they'll become a recognized international vaccine passport of some shape or form. I'm convinced of it, because that's the only way people are going to have a standard to be able to, airlines are going to push for it. International businesses are going to push for it. I mean, Dow is a great example where right now they're allowing people to travel, but when they come back to Canada, they have to quarantine for 14 days because they just don't know of all the regulations and stuff. So they come back, they have to work from home for 14 days. So if they've traveled on business, they still need to self-isolate when they come back. That's a company policy, not a political regulatory policy. So companies are adjusting to these things as we go along. And I would say to you, look at the vaccine policy framework that people are struggling with now. And people are putting notices down that says you need to get vaccinated or you're not allowed to work for us anymore, or you'll be let go, or you'll have to work from home and have a daily COVID test. So I think the whole vaccine thing is going to be very challenging until there's some kind of national position, that at least the dialogue at the provincial levels with the federal government that starts to promote a more coherent national plan that then we can take to the international market.
Thank you. I'm just going to shift gears a little bit and just talk about Kenny's red tape reduction initiative. So now that we've had a bit of a visible traction across the province, how's the true, grassroots level Main Street impact been thus far?
I always, that's a question I turn around and ask you guys. I think about, just look at the vaccine, or look at the PPE stuff, right? Like, it's businesses are saying, well, they're taking matters into their own hands. Some businesses are now starting to say, you can't come into my bar without a proof of vaccine, right? And so it shows me that in a microcosm way, there's still lots of work to be done on red tape, but I think in other ways, some of the red tape reductions has been very effective, right? And again, I think individual companies are probably better suited to speak to it. I think the idea of the red tape reduction is very sound, and I would encourage it because it goes to productivity, right? And productivity is what we need to be so focused on from a business perspective. If we can get the same number of lower inputs and increase our outputs, that's what it's all about, right? That's really what we want to, that's really where we want to be.
What are your thoughts on the new Strategic Aviation Advisory Council to the Greater Edmonton region?
So I don't know enough about this subject, to be honest with you, to comment on it in a what I would call a definitive way. So I would say that I have to wait and see a little bit more to see what it's going to look like and how that impact is going to be. If it supports strengthening the sector, I'm all in. If it's going to just add another layer, then I think I've got to ask myself what's the outcome. But I'm always more willing to give the benefit of the doubt to any new organization, because I think we need to change and transform. It's got to be continuous, and so this may be the right thing for this particular sector.
Awesome. And just around the airports, more airport stuff. How does Global Edmonton see the role of the Villanueva Airport in the region?
So we sit on the Villanueva landing network as a partner. I'm not sure they're changing the terms, but I think we're there as some kind of partner. But I look at it as an asset, right? Like it's an asset we take to market. And so the work that the VLN has done has been tremendous. And it's really what it's doing is bringing some cohesion around an asset that we can then take as a product and move to market. And that's really what we look for. It's like some of the discussions that you're doing in terms of your your commercial land that you're looking to build out on, whether it's the new stuff in the north or whether it's around Real. All that stuff is a product we take to market, right? Because you've serviced the lands, you've got infrastructure that's available. So when you're a business coming in, the question you ask yourself is, service land? Yes, no, yes, service. That's a really good positive point, right? If it's not service, then it's harder to market, because then the business will need a couple of years to get that servicing done, which means that it's dollars sitting on the sideline until they can get it activated. So I think the work that St. Albert's doing is tremendous in the space in terms of getting themselves investment ready.
Awesome, great, thank you. Okay, I got a are there cities or regions or areas in the world that we should be looking at, as a region to try to emulate their successes? Are there any crown jewels that just do a lot of this stuff really well?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I haven't got to yet, and I need to get really closer with, is Minneapolis St. Paul had a really tight partnership with businesses. So their regional AcDev organization. Now they had 18 Fortune 500 company headquarters there. And while Walmart and Target may be international competitors, locally they were collaborators. And why? Is because they wanted to create that clustering mentality where talent production was pooled and grew. The skill sets pooled and grew. So they were very collaborative from a local level. And they were also invested in the regional entity to be able to create much better outcomes for the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. So I use them as a bit of a benchmark, to be honest with you, when I was looking at how to create an Edmonton Global-like organization, because they were doing things really well. But we also looked at London Partners, Montreal International, Toronto Global, Metro Denver, Kansas City, and one Columbus. And when you looked at all those places, there are certain attributes about them that they're doing really well, right? Best practices. So we've taken a little bit of everything. Like Montreal, just so you know, Montreal International have 20 people just dedicated to talent. So they have an 82 community or 82 municipal regional AcDev entity. And what they do is that means they've got a talent person that goes on all their international travel, so that when people are looking about immigrating, so those key people they're looking at immigrating to come to Canada, they have a conversation right there and then. They have an immigration lawyer on staff to do the easier cases, and then they refer some of the harder cases, but also to capitalize on the global skills program that the federal government runs, the 2-week, if you need an employee that you can't get here, but you can find somebody overseas, you can get them into Canada within 2 weeks, right? Like it's just, there's some tremendous things we can do on the talent side that I think we also need to get a little bit tighter on. But again, we got to start with a strategy for the region on talent. And we're working closely with post-secondaries and a number of other players within the region to figure out what that may look like. So we know anecdotally that we're lacking scale-up middle management in this region, right? So we can get to 10, 15, maybe even $100 million company. It's getting it from 100 million to 200 to 300 to 500 million. We're missing that real important talent, the business talent, right? The folks that know how to move a company from there to there in terms of scaling up. So, but I don't have that definitively, I just know it anecdotally. And so those are the kind of things that we're trying to do around the talent piece.
All right, well, I got one more for you here, and then we can wrap up the Q&A here. So we've got a municipal election here underway in St. Albert, and what characteristics do you look for in a good candidate?
I always like somebody that is willing to engage and listen. It doesn't have to say they have to agree or have to decide on your particular point of view, but I really think engaged and listening because it helps inform decision making. And I think the more information you can have, the better decisions that are made. So I always look for that in a leader.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for your time, Malcolm, today. We'd like to thank you for being the keynote speaker, taking time to answer our questions, very informative stuff. And as a token of our appreciation, we'll be making a donation in your name to the YESS Youth Empowerment and Support Services. So
thank you very much, everybody, and real pleasure to see you all. And Mayor Herron and councilors, good luck on the campaign trail.
All right, so that's just a reminder, everyone. Our next luncheon is Wednesday, October 13th, 2021. Kickoff to business excellence and board elections. Thanks everyone for attending today's luncheon, and don't forget to nominate your favorite St. Albert business. And we stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.